So I will just start at the beginning. When I was a kid, I used to hear a voice call my name when I was growing up all the time in my bed. And I had two sisters, and we used to like share a bedroom, but then we got a bigger house, and I had my own bedroom, which was great and really bad because I was in the dark, and all I could hear were these whispers of my name all night, and it was horrendous. It was just, I hated going to bed, and I had this one stuffed animal that I felt like kept me safe all the time. And I would never, even when I was 16, I had this stuffed animal because I was so scared and I couldn't really tell anybody. And the reason I couldn't tell anybody, there's a few reasons, was because I grew up, I like to call it like Southern Christian, which is a little bit different. I mean, there are all kinds of flavors, right, and denominations, but in the South, it is specific. And there was a lot more hellfire and brimstone in the South. And that was very much so rooted in my mind and my belief system. It shaped everything that I believed, right? I believed there was God, this man who, was wrathful, and we were sinful. And, naturally, I just wasn't good enough as a person, and that everything I was doing was wrong, because in our church, you had to be, saved, and through Jesus Christ. And if you weren't, you were automatically going to hell. So I was hearing these sermons 3 times a week because we were going to church all the time. I was in the choir. I'd been baptized a few times growing up, but it's like I couldn't reconcile what was happening in church with what was happening with me at night. So I believed it was the devil, like calling me out, trying to scare me. And, I grew up in, I don't want to use the word unfortunately, but my parents had separated. So it wasn't like the best living situation. So I couldn't really go tell anybody what was happening because I was afraid of where I might get shipped off or something. So I had to keep it within myself. But, I remember one of my parents calling me a very fearful child. Well, yeah, because I was always hearing spirits talk. And then I was going to church saying, like I was taught that witchcraft is bad and necromancy is like evil and all of those things you hear at, in your standard Southern church. So I was hearing all of that, and I was scared out of my mind. So I would give testimonies in church, thanking God. I would try to get saved on a number of occasions. There's a lot of stories about that, but it never happened. I watched people in my church speak in tongues and get saved left and right, but I just couldn't understand why Jesus didn't want me and why I wasn't, why I was going to go to hell. And I would have all of these horrible nightmares about being in hell. And that was kind of my, you know, upbringing. That's what I lived. And the voices, as I grew older, the voices never went away. Sometimes I think that they increased, and it was horrible. I remember telling my stepsister one time only, I told her that I heard something in my room. And so she came into my bedroom with holy oil and kind of like anointed the walls. And she laughed at me because I think she thought I was making it up, but I never was. And it was just terrifying until I got to graduate school. So it's a long time. I was in my mid to late 20s, and life was, a little bit more challenging in graduate school. I wasn't doing that well and didn't really get along well with my cohort, and I wasn't getting grants. It was just a really tough time. And I was still hearing these voices, and I was just unhappy in general. And it was kind of one day I was watching TV, and there's this guy was on sharing his story about kind of like the afterlife, and just this whole concept of us being spirits and meditation. And I don't know if I believed any of that at the time, but I did sit down to close my eyes and, try to breathe for a little bit. And I would talk to God here and there, like, what's wrong with me? Why am I hearing these voices? Am I crazy? Am I really condemned? And I would pray about it. And then finally, one day I sat down and I was like, God, if this is real, if I'm supposed to do something, like, show me. And so I sat down and yes, I started to see, and I started to hear, and it was children. this was my first experience, really. They were children speaking to me, children who had passed away. And I could see them in front of me like a film strip. And I would hear them speak, their stories. And I remember it so vividly because it was so real. And then I would go to bed and dream about them some more. And then I would start dreaming about missing children. And they would show me where they were buried. And I could hear like the helicopters and the cops in my dreams, in the area that the bodies were. And I was like, I thought I was losing my mind. I didn't know. I didn't have the words to really explain what was happening, but I knew something was happening to me, but I knew I had nobody to talk to because I still had that Christian mindset. If I told anybody, they would shun me in a way. So believe it or not, I feel like it was a couple of years later when I left school and I moved to California, I decided to kind of re-engage and meditate a little bit more. And I had a number of experiences that really just led me to doing more research and then eventually opening up my hearing full blown. So I'm trying to sum it up as best as possible, but I took many steps to get there. I did a lot of reading, a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, and it was hard because I felt very guilty throughout the whole process. I felt like God was not going to accept me. My sister became full-blown Pentecostal, so she was definitely, against anything that I was doing. And I didn't feel like I had a support system, but I took some risks, and I'm glad I did. Opened myself up, and then I started to hear very clearly at that point. So I wish it was like a straight path, but it was just a number of random experiences, at least that appeared random to me, and some risks that I took along the way to confront the fact that, okay, I can hear spirits and it's real. And I'm not crazy and I'm not condemned either by God.
Yeah, I love that. I love your story. It's similar to mine. Because I also grew up in more of the Southern religious area, lots of old school Baptists, and they frowned upon anything that wasn't coming directly from, the preacher's mouth. And so I can relate to all of that, and especially the fear, that I had as a child when I would hear things and I would see things. It was not having that support system to let you know that it's real, but it's okay. And it doesn't mean that it is necessarily evil, or it's necessarily something that is trying to harm you. And then all the movies and the pop culture and all that stuff out there as well. It's really damaging to our spirit.
Yes.
And so I love that you were able to climb out of that and to find your way back to your soul and to that connection.
Yes. And it was difficult because when you are indoctrinated, into a certain belief system and you've heard it for 30 years, you don't just wake up one day and forget everything that you've been, taught. It's still somehow lingering in there, but it really was just, taking it day by day and, taking that risk of trusting. It's like there's more to this, more to what I've been taught. But also, I think the best thing that came out of this for me was that even though I'd like to say that I was learned when it came to, school, I never really questioned much about the church. Like I never questioned like where, how the Bible came to be and how our belief systems, how Christianity came to be and why, my family and their family held certain beliefs over time, but this forced me to question and take it back further and further and further and further so that I could understand for myself, like, how did we get to where we are today with modern Christianity and how did it spread across the globe? And it really forced me to do some internal questioning rather than sit down and accept just what I've been told, by people. So I feel like that was the biggest lesson for me, just being here on the earth even. But this experience has taught me that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're taught, especially, even outside of religion, but especially in religious families, we're taught not to question. We're taught not to think for ourselves and just to conform to whatever's being told to us, to whatever's being preached to us. And that was my hardest take as well, is, I knew from a young age what God felt like to me. To me, God felt just nothing but unconditional love and acceptance. But when I would go to church, God was wrathful and fearful and something that you should be afraid of. And they didn't match up to me. So I was so conflicted and so confused my entire life, thinking, well, then the God that talks to me, is that the same God that talks to you? Because
Right.
they don't sound the same.
Yes.